Y'all ready for this? Battle zero. Battle zero. So if we properly zero the weapon, and I don't want to get into too much detail there yet, but if we properly zero the weapon, let's talk about our holds, our holdovers, okay? So a couple assumptions here. Man-sized target. Man-sized target is going to be defined, generally speaking, by the width of the chest or width of the shoulders. It depends on what institution you're at. For example, Appleseed, great organization. Appleseed is an American volunteer organization, and they do classes teaching you how to shoot. Very inexpensive, great program. Pretty limited in what they teach. They teach really only like shooting fundamentals, kind of an old school method, but they use an assumption of 16 inches wide. Therefore, 4 minutes of angle will be effective out to 400 yards. But let's talk about the U.S. Army. The U.S. Army uses 50 centimeters, or 19.5 inches approximately. For our purposes, we can say 45 centimeters, 46 centimeters, 48 centimeters, 18 inches, 19 inches, are all good. At the school, here in Monarch Defense, we have a lot of targets out there that are 18 inches wide. So you can use that as an assumption. The point is, there is no standard size person. So anywhere between 45 and 50 centimeters is pretty accurate. Anywhere between 16 and 19 inches wide is pretty accurate on a target. Now, there's a certain amount of height that we can get out of our target. You might assume 24 inches, for example. U.S. Army uses gigantic targets that are a whole meter tall. That's almost 40 inches tall, 39.6 or something like that. And they're gigantic. They're super duper big. But for our purposes, a lot of our targets are going to be 24 inches tall. But let's look at this piece of paper, and you got an idea. So now, if the weapon is properly zeroed, this is our assumption. We're going to shoot at a man-sized target. At what distance do we have to do what type of hold? Okay. So, couple distinctions in doctrine. When we discuss American doctrine, we're going to be aiming center mass. Where is center mass on me?
Center chest.
I lost a little bit of weight last week because I've been kind of sick. So center mass is in the ramen. It's in the noodles. It's in the sushi. It's in the In-N-Out cheeseburger. Yeah, that's center mass right here. Okay. My center mass is right here. That's center mass. In self-defense, do we tend to shoot center mass? When we're discussing self-defense gunfighting. The answer is no. In self-defense gunfighting, we shoot center chest. Notice center mass and center chest are different. Center mass is down here. Center chest is up here. For self-defense gunfighting, really close gunfighting, center chest. That's also taken into consideration. The enemy doesn't wear body armor. Now, Soviet Union doctrine is a little bit different. They shoot at the bottom of the target, the belt. They shoot at the belt buckle down here, down by the belt, a little bit above the belly button, maybe at the belly button, the natural waist. Because remember, most Eastern European countries had a tunic, including American. Like if we look at First World War, for example, you have a tunic, an outside coat, and then you had a big belt and a belt buckle that went around the outside of your coat. It kind of held everything together, and it held your bandolier and your canteen and all your other pouches kind of together. So that belt buckle went right here, right around your belly button. So think of these as body holds, or parts of the body we can aim for. Top of the head, center of the face, the chin, the forehead, the base of the neck, which is also known as sternoclavicular notch, center of chest, center of mass, the belly button or the belt buckle, and then the waistline, and then the groin. Okay, so moving on. If we're discussing Soviet Union weapons, and if I was to take this weapon and set it to the P setting, 100, 200, 300, 400 meters, or P for my straight shot distance, my combat zero, battle zero, is going to get me the maximum range available to that weapon system as engineered, as long as I aim for the belt buckle. I'm going to aim actually relatively low on the target. Now that means most distances I'm actually going to be hitting high. Okay, so let me ask you this. For this AK-47, if I'm going to shoot somebody at 50 meters, what do I aim for? Let's say a distance of 50 meters. The belt buckle.
Okay. I was
let's say we're at 100 meters.
Yeah.
What do I aim for? The belt buckle. Let's say we're at 150 meters. What do I aim for?
Belt buckle.
The belt buckle. And at 200 meters, what do I aim for?
Belt buckle.
The belt buckle. 300 meters, what do I aim for?
Belt buckle.
The belt buckle. 400 meters, what do I aim for? Negative.
Right.
400 meters, if without making sights adjustment, I'm out of point blank range. I got to start aiming up here to drop those bullets down into the target. Do we see now? We're outside of our point blank range. Let me draw this for you. Imagine this line right here is your line of sight. That's what you can see. Okay, that's what you're aiming at. Now your bullet will start below your barrel. Sorry, bullet will start below your sights and will rise upwards. You're going to launch the bullet up in the air to rise up here, and it's going to rise above your line of sight. So it never actually rises. Bullets are always falling, but we launch at an upward angle relative to us, relative to our perception. And so relative to us, we think of it as rising. It's never actually fully rising, it's actually falling. But we launch it upwards, and it's going to reach an apex. Okay, apex. Come on, apex. At a certain distance. Now, then it's going to cross over, known as your far zero, And then, of course, up here, you have what we call a near zero. Near zero. Near and far. And then your bullet will drop down below your line of sight, and it's going to quickly drop away to the point where it's unusable, like they're not next to each other anymore. Because you think about this, line of sight keeps on going infinitely, and this bullet's going to keep on falling infinitely, and so they're nowhere near each other. But for a period of time, it is close enough that we can still use this aim to assume that we're going to hit the target, and then we're going to cut it off. Right there. And this is known as, of course, point blank range. PBR, point blank range. The limit at which we can look, aim, and shoot a target. Now, in American doctrine, we're going to aim center mass, which is in the middle. The middle of whatever you see, the middle of whatever part of the body that is exposed to you. And so, sometimes your bullet will be below it, sometimes your bullet will be above it, and sometimes your bullet will be below it. But the point is, we just aim and we look and we aim for the middle, and it's good. All right? So, let's suppose today in class we're going to be using the Army Zero. We're going to be using a 25-meter zero. This is, of course, known as a battle sight zero, also known as a BZO. Battle sight zero, a 25-meter BZO. Now, on most modern weapons, when I say most modern weapons, because there's very few calibers that modern weapons use, and the geometry of modern weapons are all pretty similar. It doesn't really matter if it's an AK-47 or if it's an AR-15 or it's a Galil or a FAL or a G3. They're all going to be built around the same geometry. What is that? Well, the distance between your cheekbone and your eye. That amount of distance right here between your cheek and your eye, that's the distance of your sights. Sight height over your bore. Similar here. Sight of your barrel over your bore, or your sights over your barrel. And so, because of this geometry, on most modern weapons, you're going to get pretty similar performance. If we zero for 25 meters with a modern intermediate supersonic round, or if we're talking 5.56, we're talking 7.62 NATO. By the way, that's NATO, not the AK round. We're talking about 5.45. We're talking about 7.62, 5.54. These are our modern cartridges, okay? All of these cartridges have almost the same trajectory, almost the same. So we're not discussing 300 Blackout. We're not discussing AK-47, short fat rounds. Those are going to be similar. They're just less. They're just inferior, okay? These rounds are going to give you basically a 25-meter near zero, 300-meter far zero. We call this a 25, 300-meter zero, battle zero. Again, this is an approximation. This is an approximation. If you have a longer barrel, you're going to get more performance. If you have a shorter barrel, you're going to get less performance. Using a more efficient bullet, you're going to get more performance. If you're using a heavier, slower bullet, you're going to get less performance. If you're shooting 5.56 NATO, you could get a little bit more performance. You're shooting 223 Remington, which is a lower pressure, just a cheaper ammo you buy at the store. It's lower pressure for sporting usage, not for military usage. You're going to get a little bit less performance. But this is an approximation. I want you to memorize 25, 300 meter, battle zero. Okay, so that means that we're going to get between 300 to about 350 meters approximately below your line of sight. So let's talk about a typical M4, typical AR-15, like this. Carbine length gas system, 16-inch barrel, 5.56.
Mid-length.
Midline, okay, fine, whatever. It's the same. It doesn't matter. But I'm saying like a carbine size gun, okay?
Yep.
Not 20-inch barrel, right? And what kind of ammo could we be shooting? Are we shooting 62, shooting 55 grain?
Probably
55 grain. Okay, so what type of muzzle velocity would we expect out of a most typical American sporting rifle 55 grain bullets?
a little over 3,000 feet per second.
Yeah, so we're going to assume a muzzle velocity, let's call it 3,000 feet per second. Notice, if this was out of an M16, what type of muzzle velocity should we be expecting out of this guy? With the same ammo.
Is it a 33, 32?
3,300 feet per second. That's a pretty big difference. That's the difference between a 300 meter far zero and a 354 meter far zero. That equates to the distance of like point blank range of somewhere around, let's call this like 380 meters on a carbine, 380 meters approximately for point blank range, meaning you don't make any compensation, you can hit a man-sized target without aiming upwards. Whereas for the M16, we're in almost like 420 meters if it's a hot day. A significantly extended point blank range. So people cut their barrel because they like it. It's shorter and easier. As long as you're not stretching this distance, you're between 350 and 400 meter distance, you're not going to notice the difference. You won't really know it. It's not going to affect you. But once you get to the distance where you're shooting the limits of point blank range, the limits of the point and shoot type of distance, you will definitely feel the difference between an M16 and a carbine. Does that make sense? If you're shooting competition, like over the summer, I shot a competition, Texas, it's hot, 110 degree Fahrenheit. I'm shooting 5.56, I'm shooting an M16 with an ACOG, and boy, these bullets are just going great. They're sailing right over the top of the targets. And I found myself shooting at 500 meter target, but using my 400 meter setting. And shooting 300 meter setting to hit 400 meter targets. So the bullets were just flying way better than what the rifle was expecting, what the optic is built for. Because again, I was using an ACOG, which is made for an M4 for 62 grain. M4s with 62 grain, it just doesn't have the performance of an M16 with 55 grain. All right, we good? The point is, all rifles have this trajectory, and if you understand how to zero them, then it's going to be very, very simple. So let's ask a couple questions. Man-sized target. Okay, man-sized target. At 0 meters, if I want to shoot a man-sized target, where do I aim?
Center mass.
Center mass. At 25 meters, I want to hit a man-sized target, where do I aim?
Center mass.
Center mass. At 75 meters, where do I aim? Center mass. 100 meters, where do I aim? Center mass. 150 meters, where do I aim? Center mass. At 175 meters, where do I aim?
Center mass.
Center mass. 200 meters, where do I aim? Center mass. 250 meters, where do I aim? Center mass. 300 meters, where do I aim?
Center mass.
Center mass. 350 meters, where do I aim?
A little high.
Center mass.
Oh, you. Sorry. Yeah.
400 meters, where do I aim?
Center mass.
Top of the chest.
Okay.
Base of the neck. Because now we're exiting point blank range.
Gotcha.
But we can stretch our abilities to shoot point blank range a little bit more just by aiming up here, and you know your bullet's going to drop somewhere in there.
Okay.
But if the enemy's wearing armor, it's probably going to ping off his armor, right? Because you aim here, it's probably going to hit him here. The point is, it's still pretty good. We can still have a high probability of hitting the target. We tracking? But you see how we transition out of point blank range?
Are you for point blank ranges like upper capacity? You just have them. You just know them. So like 354 meters and 420 meters. That's just information you know. It's not information I'm supposed to be able to infer from.
You cannot infer this. You calculate this with a ballistic calculator. I'm giving you some sample numbers, but again, it depends on how hot it is. It depends on your particular gun and barrel. It depends on your particular brand of ammunition. It depends on your altitude. It depends on a number of different factors. So this is an approximation, just to give you a range of what might be acceptable.
Okay.
Right. So even though we call this a 25-300 0, we're controlling the 25 part of it. We're not controlling the 300 or 354 meter part of it. That's something that we don't have control over. And that's controlled by barrel length and brand of ammunition and temperature.
So when you point at a target and you think it's sighted straight to the target, the barrel is actually a little bit.
Correct. Correct. The barrel is always pointed a little bit upwards.
And think
so
of
you
the distance between the bore and your sight, right? Like understanding that those aren't the same helps you sort of picture how it's angled up.